in terms of the economy, we are paying the price for misdiagnosing what happened over the last 7 years. And let me explain that. I think when we say what happened over the last 7 years, we say, well, there was a huge financial crisis and we've had a very slow recovery. That's true. But I think when tomorrow's historians look back at this early 21st century, they will say, actually, the world was hit by three economic shocks simultaneously. There was a series of financial crises. The subprime crisis morphed into the 2008 global financial crisis, morphed into the euro debt crisis, which in turn has now morphed into a debt crisis in much of the emerging world. In each case, there was a very big debt buildup, which proved unsustainable and then caused financial collapse or financial challenges. That's one very, very big shock. The second shock that has happened simultaneously is that we are in the midst of, and you know this very well in the world of higher education, we are in the midst of a profound technological revolution. A revolution where the combination of mobile, artificial intelligence, huge increase in computing power is extending the scale of things that can be done by computers enormously dramatically and far further than we imagined even 10 years ago. And that revolution we're, I think, closer to the beginning of than the end of, and that is having a huge impact on the skills that people need, on the income distribution. It's probably the biggest reason for the widening of inequality. It's a revolution that is entirely separate to the aftermath of the financial crisis, but happening simultaneously. And then the third big economic shock that I think sort of coincidentally has happened at the same time is what I would call a demographic one. We have, across much of the advanced world, a cohort of people reaching their prime pre-retirement saving years at the same time as you've got this technological revolution, which is basically reducing the demand for capital-intensive goods. We're becoming a more virtual world. Lots of the new things that you want to spend your money on are not things that require heavy capital investment. And if you put all of those three things together, oddly, they have exactly the same consequence, which is that saving is high, demand is weak, and investment is relatively weak. If you think about it, after a financial crisis, people need to retrench, they need to rebuild their balance sheets, so they spend less, saving increases, and spending slows. The wave of technological disruption is widening income gaps, so more of the returns, more of the national income is going to companies, and it's going to people with higher skills who tend to save more. Again, that weakens demand. So the demographic thing is doing the same thing. The result is that we have a weak recovery, very, very low interest rates, and weak demand. But I think what happened, if you look at what policymakers did, they looked at that over the last 7 years, and they thought in much of the rich world, we're seeing a big increase in public debt, in government debt. We need to have budget austerity. We need to cut the deficit. That's been the single biggest unifying theme of policy response, whether it's in the UK, whether it's here with the sequester a couple of years ago, whether the focus on deficit reduction, whether it's in Greece or whether it's in Germany. And so rather than doing, if you disaggregated those shocks, you would have thought, okay, in the aftermath of the banking crisis, actually what you need to do is you need to recapitalize the banks, you need to spend public money while the private sector improves its balance sheet. That's what Sweden did in the early 1990s. That's the sort of traditional textbook way to respond to a banking crisis. Technological shock, well, you look back at the first industrial revolution. What do you need to do? You need to equip people with the skills that they need to survive and to thrive in the new world, and you need to ease the economy's ability to adjust. Demographics, there's not really very much you can do. So those would be the two responses you should have. In neither case would the ideal response have been cut your budget deficit.